Hi, welcome to Math Tricks with Mr. Allen. Uh, as always, we learn something new and interesting. So today we'll learn how to multiply and divide by 125. So the math tricks of multiplying by 125. So the first trick that we will employ over here, or the first strategy that we will use, is that whatever number is being multiplied, number times 125. So step one is we'll take the number and we'll divide it by 8. So that's your first step. Now step two is you introduce an estimated number of zeros. So depending on the question, like if you're multiplying something by 125, you can estimate like where about the answer would be, and that's what we will be using. So for example, if I were doing 8 times 125, so if I'm doing this question, so the first step that I'm asking you to do is to take this number and divide it by 8. So step 1, that's a fairly easy division, so I get a 1. And then what would 8 times 125 be? 8 times 125. So 125 times 2 is 250. 125 times 3 is 375. And then 125 times 4 is 500. So if we look at it, 8 times 100 is 800, right? We were just to do this multiplication. Now we've got a number that is above 100. So we know that the answer has to be above 800. So step 2 says introduce an estimated amount or number of zeros. So for this I'm going to put in 1000. It will be close to 1000. And if I were even to use the traditional algorithm to multiply and get 40, 8 times 2 is 16, 16 plus 4 is 20, then 8 times 1 is 8, plus 2 is 10. So we get 1000. So divide the number by 8 and then introduce an estimated number of zeros depending on the question. So you've got to be very vigilant and aware of where the answer would be. You can test it, you can see how it works, and then use that information to get your result. Like in this case, we know that 8 times 100 is 800, but we have 125, so that's a little bigger than 800. Therefore, the answer will be closer to 1000 or even equal to 1000. So if you were to use this strategy, you'll be able to get a fairly close answer to what we are supposed to get. So the trick, once again, you take your number, you divide by 8, and then you introduce an estimated number of zeros. All right, let's try a few more examples before we move on. So I'm gonna erase. I'll leave the rules so that we have it up here. And the best way I would recommend is take the number and multiply it by 100 to give you a rough estimate about where the number would lie. And that might just help you get the answer. So, for example, if I have 32 times 125. Now step 1 says take this number and divide it by 8. So 32 divided by 8. So I get a 4. And then the second step says that introduce an estimated number of zeros. So now if I were to multiply 32 by 100, what would I get? 3200, right? So we know that the number has to be above 3200, but it's also a number that can give you this 4000. If I were to multiply using the traditional algorithm, I'll get 5 times 2, which is 10, 5 times 3, which is 15, plus 1 is 16, and then I'm multiplying in the tens position, so 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, and then the 100 position, so I'll get 2 and 3. So 0, 0, 1, 2, 8, 10, so I get 4000. So by using this rough estimate by 32 multiplied by 100, I can see how close I am to the true answer. And trial and error will help you in this entire process. Test some questions, see how it works, and then let's try another question. So I'm gonna erase. And again, as I keep saying, like, don't rush into any tricks. Take some time, ponder over it, peruse over the entire step, and then test it with numbers, test it with a variety of numbers, and then you'll be able to work with it. So, let's try on 120 times 1.25. Now, if you recall from our previous lectures and our previous tricks, you know that whenever you see zeros or decimals, you disregard them to begin the trick. And then at the end, you reintroduce it to be able to connect with it. Okay, so 120 times 1.25. So if I were to disregard the 0 and the decimal, I'll get this. 12 times 125. Now, what's step 1? Step 1 is divide 12 by 8. What is 12 divided by 8? It's 1.5. Now, if I look at 120 times 1, that's 120. Now I'm putting another quarter into it. So my answer will be somewhere between 100 and 200. That is for sure. Because if I were to multiply, check this out. If I were to do this, I get 120. If I were to do 120 times 2, I get 240. Right? So 1.25 is somewhere here, in between. So my answer will be between 120 and 240. That's what that is saying. So when I reintroduce the zeros into it, I have 1.5, and then I'm adding a zero, but then I've got two decimal places, right? So 12 divided by 8 is 1.5. And then let's try to estimate how many zeros or where should this answer go. We've already figured this part out, that if I were to multiply 120 by 1, I get 120. If I multiply it by 2, I get 240. But right now, it's 1.25, which is 1.25. So my final answer would be 150. And I can test this also if I would like. So if I were doing 12 times 125, let's do this math. I'll get 0, 1, 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. Then the tens place, I'll get 4 and 2. And then the hundreds place, I'll get 2 and 1. I get 1500. And then I've got two decimal places, but I also have one 0. So if I introduce the 0, it becomes 15,000. And then I move the decimals by 2 spots. So I get 150, which gives me the same answer, the same way as I was estimating. All right, let's try one more. So the only tricky part in this trick is that tricky part in this trick is that you may need to do some work to estimate it. So that's what we will be working on. We'll try to estimate what's happening. Right, so that's our goal. So when you're estimating, just be careful with what your strategy is. So again, practice will help. The more experience you have with numbers, that will be crucial, because that will just help you out significantly. And let's try one last one, and then we'll do some practice. Now again, we have decimals. So we're going to remove the decimals. So treat the question this way. Now the first step is take this number and divide by 8. So what do we get when we divide 72 by 8? We get 9. Now we've got to introduce a certain number of zeros to get our answers. So 7.2 times 12 and a half. Now if I were just doing 7 times 12, what do I get? I get 84, right? Now I've got 7.2, which is a little bigger than 7, and I've got 12 and a half, which is a little bigger than 12. So I'm already at the 84 spot, and we know this is at 9. So we'll bring in a 0. we'll get 90. Think about this. Then we'll try a few questions. So the trick says number divided by 8, then introduce an estimated number of zeros. Alright, I'm gonna put a few questions up here, give you guys like 10 minutes, and then we'll try solving them. I'll put a different variety just to get you to see what's happening. Alright. So try these. I'll give you like 10 minutes and then we'll check it out. So let's see what's happening in these answers. I hope everyone was able to solve at least some of them, if not all. And we'll follow the two strategies. So step one is divide 8, divide number by 8. Step two is add zeros depending on the estimation. So those are your two steps. Now if I take the first question, 16 times 125, what's 16 divided by 8? It's 2. And then if I were doing 16 times 100, I'll get 1600. So I've got a number that is a little bigger than 100, so my answer will be above 1600. So what's the closest estimated number of zeros? 2000. Now if I'm doing 88 times 125, I'll do 88 divided by 8, which gives me 11. And then 88 times 100 is 8800. So now I'm doing 88 times 125. So that should solve to 11,000. Let me just confirm. 11,000. Now the next one, 32 times 125. We can rearrange the numbers using the commutative property of multiplication. So 32 divided by 8 is 4. And then 32 times 100 is 3200. Again, we are using a number bigger than 100, so we end up getting 4,000. Next one, 240 times 125. So 240 divided by 8. We can also do 24 divided by 8, which gives us a 3, and then we add the 0. Now if I'm doing 240 multiplied by 100, I get 24,000. So now I've got a number above 100. So this will be more than 24,000. So my answer will be 30,000. And then I've got 12.5 times 3.2. So again, as we worked earlier, there we disregard the zeros or the decimals. So what's 3.2? 32 divided by 8, that's 4. And then think this way, what is 12 multiplied by 3? What do you get? You get 36. So 12 and a half times 3.2 will be 40. Okay, 20 times 125. What is 20 divided by 8? That's 1.5. And then what's 2 times 100? That's 200. Sorry, 20 times 100 is 2000. So this will give me 1500 as my estimation. And then I've got 1.25 times 64. So what's 64 divided by 8? That's 8. And now if I do 64 times 1, I'll get 64. Now this is a little bigger than it, so I'll get 80. And I can try these, like if I'm doing 64 times 125, Like if you're ever in doubt, go back to the basics and solve things. Two times 6 is 12. Then, so I get 0, I get 0, I get 1 up here. I get 8,000. But then I have 2 decimal points. So there you go, 80. So use these strategies. The basics are not something that you want to forget. You want to remember your basics. Because your basics are, your foundation is what will take you forth. And that's what you want to build upon. So okay, 4.8 times 125. So if I were to change it to 48, what's 48 divided by 8? That's 6. Then what's 4 times 125? That is 500. So this will take me to 600. And then I've got 560 times 1.25. So again, 560 times 100 is 56,000. But we've got 560 times 1 and a little more than that 1. So it's a number beyond 560. So that's our reference. So what's 56 divided by 8? That's 7. 700. And then the last one, we've got 96. .96 times 125. Now this is lesser than 1. So we'll get an answer that is lesser than 1. That is something you want to appreciate or remember. So what is 96 divided by 8? That's 12. And then our answer will be below 125 because it's times 0.96. So our final answer will be 120. So see how easy, like if I go through each step carefully, I can figure out what is happening. Peruse through these, try a few more, estimate things, and it should work out for you. Okay, we'll take a 15-minute break and then I'll see you in a bit. Welcome back. So we'll do the converse for this. So rapidly divide by 125. So we already did multiply by 125. Now we are doing the opposite. So in multiply by 125, we did this, divide number divided by 8, and then we used an estimated number of zeros. Now for rapidly divide by 125, we'll do the opposite. Number times 8 and then estimated number of zeros. Depending on what's being used, right? So there's some brainstorming to do before you can reach a conclusion. And that's where you might need some practice with that part. So for example, if I have 300 divided by 125. Now if you recall, when we have zeros or decimals, we disregard them for the first few steps and then we bring them in at the end. So let's treat this question like if it were 3 divided by 125. Now what's the first step? The first step is saying take this number and multiply 8. So 3 times 8 is 24. And then, what do you think 300 divided by 125 would be? So 125, if I were to write the table of 125, this is what I get. 125 times 1 is 125. 125 times 2 is 250. And then 125 times 3 is 375. So we have 300, which is somewhere here, right? So this is 125 times 1, 125 times 2, 125 times 3. So our answer will be somewhere between 2 and 3. That's what we are getting. And we are getting 24. So if it's between 2 and 3, where should we put the decimal point so that it works out? So 300 divided by 125 would be 2.4, because 300 is between 125 times 2 and 125 times 3. So it's somewhere in between that. Therefore, the answer would be 2.4. Let's try another one. So if I have 111 divided by 111 divided by 125. So if the question is 111 divided by 125. So what's our first step? We take this number and we multiply by 8. So what do we get? 8, 8, 8. And now if we go through the table of 125, 111 is below 125. So that means this answer should be less than 1. Does that make sense? 111 is below 125, so the answer should be less than 1. Therefore, 111 divided by 125 is 0.888. And try it, as I keep saying, like try all the questions, try a variety, and then that might help with your solutions. Let's try another one. Let's say if I have 70 divided by 12.5. Let's make it a little challenging. So as I stated many times, what if we change the question to 7 divided by 125? Remove the 0, remove the decimal. Now step 1 is take this number and multiply by 8. You get 28. Now because there is a 70, we'll add a 0. Sorry, 7 times 8 is 56. Sorry, 56. So 70 and 12.5. So if you were going through the table of 12.5, if you'd like, you'll get 70 and 12.5. So if I were going in terms of 12.5, what all numbers do I have? 12.5, then the next one's 25, then 37.5, then 50, then 62.5, and then 75. Now if you look at this, this is times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 70 is somewhere in between over here. So what do you think we should get for this answer? 5.6. Let's try one last one. Then we'll wrap it up. So let's say my question is 45 and 1.25. So again, as I stated many times, like change the question to this, and then let's multiply this by 8. So 45 times 8. If you need a calculator, you may use it. So 45 times 8 is 360. And now we've got 1.25. So I've got a chart up here, and like right here, we can use these numbers. So for 1.25 times, this is times 10, times 20, times 30, times 40. 45 is over here. So it's between 30 and 40. So what do you think we should get as our answer for this? Should be 36. You can write it as 36. So there's a form of estimation that you can use, and there is some trial and error to be able to get the correct answer. So just practice, work with numbers, see how it works out, and then you'll notice that it finally does give you a solution. So thank you for attending, and we did learn about math tricks with 125. I'll see you in the next class. Thank you.